Hey everyone, what's up? This is Drew from the Drew Experience, the voice of Kyokushin karate, but also now entering in Canadian politics. This is my first podcast back since the federal election, and today it's a very big episode. This is a very important episode. I'm joined by someone who really got me into politics and to take up and to realize that I have a voice too. I want to also shout out a few people first. So first, I want to shout out David Torgman, who's running for mayor in Côte St. Luc, so make sure to vote for him on November 2nd. Margie Ramos of Talloed and Free, who also mentioned you, and she runs a successful business, so make sure to support her. My stepmom got one of her products, and it's the best there is. Also, my friends Michael and James, they are some fellow conservatives who have a chat going where we really make sure to bring conservatives together in order to help unite Canada and whatnot. And lastly, Goldie Gamari, who is an amazing former MP, and I consider my Iranian sister. You know her as well. She's fighting the good fight. And as well as all the Iranians that we know, this podcast for you. Because today I'm joined by the one, the only, and I got to read his accomplishments, but you know what? Senator Leo Housakos. Welcome to the show, Senator.
Thank you, Drew. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me on. And looking forward to the exchange. You're somebody who inspires me, and I want to thank you more than anybody else. I want to thank you for your engagement, for your involvement in politics, for your involvement in your community, for really honoring your background, your heritage, both your Persian heritage, your Jewish heritage. It's very important, because if we don't know where we come from, we don't know where we are, and if we don't have an idea where we are, we don't know what kind of world and future world and society we want to build.
Very, very true, Senator. And obviously, I just have to read out your accomplishments. I had to study them. So Pangiata, I want to thank you because I had to do my homework here. So first of all, you've been involved since in the Progressive Conservatives. You helped the young Jean Charest come up in 1993 after Prime Minister Mulroney, the late PM Mulroney, stepped down. Then you also started going into politics, working in transportation, human rights, trade, communications. I could see why you're such a good communicator.
I've done it all. I got involved in politics, Drew, at a very young age. I go way back before 1993. I go back to 1984 when the Mulroney government got elected. And I cut my teeth in politics working for a local member of parliament in Pierre-Fond-Dollard, a gentleman named the Honorable Jerry Wiener, who was elected under Mr. Mulroney in 84, re-elected in 88, was a former mayor of DDO and was Minister of Immigration. And he was also Secretary of State. So I go way back. I'm an old guy in politics and fortunate enough to have been a small part of the Mulroney government in the 80s. Then I got, of course, the honor and opportunity to be appointed to the Senate by Prime Minister Harper. And you're right, I have always stood for things that I believe in and believe in things I stand for, and I walk the talk. I think I try to speak for people that don't have a voice, and I think the Senate of Canada is that upper chamber. It gives us an opportunity as an added value to the House of Commons. A lot of Canadians don't recognize there's two chambers in Parliament of Canada. There's the House of Commons, but there's also the Senate, which speaks for, like I said, people that sometimes don't get the opportunity to be represented in the House of Commons.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny what you said about 1984. So I just finished Memoirs by Mulroney, one of the greatest books I've ever read of a former prime minister. He has a way of telling stories, and that's a 1,000-page book, and my attention span is all over the place. I read that within 2 months.
No, Mr. Mulroney was a great prime minister. He did some transformational things for the country. I remember as a young conservative at the time, and I had the privilege of having met him a number of occasions, he always said the easy things are easy. He says it's the hard things that people in public life have to rise to the occasion and meet even tomorrow's challenges today. And I think sometimes politicians, they put off some of the difficult things and they don't take them on. And when you don't take on the difficult things, you don't serve constituents properly. And if you prolong the challenges and you prolong some of the difficulties and the tough questions, it just festers, right? It's like cancer, so to speak. You gotta cut it at its source, and you gotta treat it, and you gotta deal with it. If you put things off, it only gets worse. So today's politicians, they have a tendency sometimes of putting aside the difficult stuff and not taking them on.
I agree. And you know, another thing about former Prime Minister Mulroney, he was the reason why I got into history, actually. I had a history teacher, so I went to Vanguard for those with learning disabilities. And my high school teacher, Sec 2, and I had her in Sec 4 for the Canadian history, she always said, you know, Drew, she goes, I know you're a conservative, but always be like a Brian Mulroney, because you have the potential to build relationships. And she was right. And I mean, he was the reason why, like, I became a conservative. So when people say you're a conservative, I go, I am a Mulroney conservative, because I believe in building through relationships and doing the hard stuff. Even though people might not like it, they'll respect you for it at the end of the day.
I totally agree. Mr. Mulroney took on free trade when it wasn't popular. He put into place measures like the GST when they weren't popular. He fought apartheid on the world scene against the deplorable apartheid and racist policies of South Africa back in the mid-'80s when it wasn't an easy thing to do. But anybody can do the easy things. Like I said, Mr. Mulroney said that leadership was not for the timid and the timorous. It's for the bold and the strong. So it was great advice that he gave me. Like I said, I'm so privileged because I got, as a young conservative, to meet and work with not only Brian Mulroney, but Stephen Harper, two of the great Canadian prime ministers, that I can look back and say that I learned so much from both of them.
That's amazing. You know, obviously, we could go on about that, but I have to make sure I keep it to topic, because as someone who's high functioning, you know, as they say neurodivergent, I say autistic, I can go off on tangents. So that's why I had to really make sure, like, I keep my points.
We all can, Drew, so don't worry about that. We all can.
No, but, you know, honestly, yes. Also, one thing, too, I want to add, you became a senator in 2008, named by Prime Minister Harper, one of the, I think, the best decisions he's ever made. Then you became the Speaker of the Senate in 2015, if I got that right. And then in 2025, he is officially the leader of the Senate opposition. And this is a massive thing. So that's why it's such an honor to have him here. Like, I've hosted martial artists, I've hosted pro fighters, but this is like, it's like, wow. It's like, I didn't even feel like I'm talking to a role model. It feels like I'm talking to, like, one of my late father's friends, actually.
Well, I appreciate it, Drew. You're my role model because, like I said, there's too many times we pigeonhole people with disabilities. We pigeonhole people who are on the spectrum. And I've always said in life, everybody is just made by God in different forms, and they're given different gifts and different challenges. So, and and we all know, of course, in the world of autism, there's different levels of autism. But I believe everybody is special. Everybody has a gift. It's just a question of finding the ability to hone the gift, to harness that gift. And clearly, you have many gifts, young man. So I'm very honored to be here on this show and do this interview with you, and honored to speak for the autism community in general, because I've met so many brilliant people in the autism community, high functioning, low functioning. They all have gifts. And I think as a society, we'll never be able to achieve our true potential until we emulsify all the talent, all the resources that we have in our society, human resources and others, into one powerful Canadian force. When we do that, when we achieve that, we'll do great things.
I agree, and that's why you came up with Bill S-203. That's the reason why I became a conservative. I'll never forget when I read it in October 2023. I was still kind of recovering from my mom's recent passing. You know, both my late parents, they were very big advocates, even my amazing stepmom. Proof you don't need to be blood to be a good parent, because there are amazing step-parents out there who take on the role. So shout out to my stepmom, Diane. She's amazing. She's been in my life since.
God bless you.
Yeah. And, you know, they fought tooth and nail, like, to make sure I had the tutors, the resources. Because imagine when you get a diagnosis, and, you know, I'm very lucky, Senator, but how many Canadians are left as statistics to the government where they have to take the welfare? I was offered that welfare, and my parents said, you're not going to be that, because then you're putting yourself in a box to never realize your potential.
Look, we have to align. We need to align government. We need to align our healthcare services. We need to align our services of education far better than they are right now. There's too many families who have children with disabilities, particularly children who are on the spectrum, that are being left behind. You were very fortunate. I know you had, even though both your parents are no longer with you, you had fantastic parents that put in the time, that put in the effort, and now you have a bonus parent, a fantastic stepmom that's putting in all the energy required to help you reach your potential. And I believe you're an example like many others out there. But there's also example of cases where either the parents let their kids down, society leaves those children down, and we have to do a better job at creating alignment. You mentioned S-203. I'm glad, Drew, nothing is more touching for me as a parliamentarian to know that the work I do in Ottawa has helped somebody, has inspired somebody, has given somebody hope. And of course, the autism community was one that I'm close to, and for far too long a time, a lot of families who had lost hope. I'm glad that S203 provided at least that. And it was probably the proudest moment I had as a parliamentarian, where we put forward the bill, and I did it in conjunction with other colleagues. My seconder on the bill was Senator Peter Beam, who cares so much about the autism community. There were so many senators that participated in passing the bill in record time. We got it through committee, we amended it, we studied it, we strengthened it, and of course, it's just a framework. It's a framework that is encouraging the federal government to work towards alignment of all the various sectors of society. It was not prescriptive on purpose. It was a bill flexible enough to give governments an opportunity, like I said, to create that alignment with provincial governments, healthcare services, the education providers, and of course stakeholders, and ultimately families across the country. It also got through the House of Commons in record time. So to get bills through in a question of a few months, especially private members' bills, it's quite an achievement. So I'm a little bit disappointed that the previous Liberal government under Justin Trudeau and the current Carney government have not really embraced the bill, have not really followed the advice of what is in S203 to get it done and get to the next level. And there's still a lot of gaps in terms of creating alignment across the country and providing services. And as long as those gaps remain, we will never achieve our potential.
That's very sad, because honestly, you know, for all the things the Liberals say about progressive, inclusivity, and disability, it's just sad that they had to stop. The bill is there, but it's like, you know, you spoke with Northern Perspective, and you know their kid is also special needs, and also Pierre's daughter Valentina is a nonverbal. You know, they're very lucky. I mean, look, I mean, Northern Perspective, they do what they can, but Pierre is very lucky with Anna, but you know, and I'm very lucky too. But when I hear stuff about, you know, autistic people, like one of my friends is a social worker who works with those, the system is just, it's not that it's failing, it's just that it's so overwhelmed. And I think this bill would have helped given some new life in order for those in those situations to reach their potential.
And look, the bill is still there. Hopefully the government will wake up between now and the end of this Carney regime, and they'll embrace it. Like I said at the beginning of this interview, weak politicians put aside difficult questions, and they like to deal with easy problems. This is a difficult one. It requires, like I said, balance, commitment, alignment, capital investment on the part of the federal government and provincial governments. But now it's 1 in 38 Canadian births who are afflicted or challenged by being on the spectrum. And if you look at it over the last few years, it went from being 1 in 60, 1 in 55, 1 in 45. So the issue is becoming more prevalent. And let me tell you, to our audience out there, if you haven't been directly or indirectly touched yet by someone on the spectrum, you will be soon. It's a matter of time. And it's sad that if you have to wait for that particular moment. Like I said, citizens can only make a better society when we engage not only with things that bother our family directly, but we should be concerned about things that bother families down the street and around the corner. That's what building a strong society with a common destiny and a common goal is all about, caring about people. If we didn't care about people, you know, we wouldn't be involved in public policy making. I wouldn't be sitting in Parliament. If you didn't care about people, Drew, you wouldn't be doing this podcast to reach out to citizens about things that are important to you, but you're also reaching out to people about things that are important to them.
I try to be an example, you know. It's like I ask myself, like, you know, what would my mom want after everything? How can I give back? You know, and as you know, I'm someone that really struggled with being on the spectrum, because back when I was diagnosed in 1999, it wasn't really accepted being on the spectrum. And I remember back in the day when it was called then Asperger's, I told people that, and I was bullied relentlessly for it, because, you know, people are ignorant. It's like you said, people like to laugh at. I watched your interview with that kid who came and said they say autistic this, autistic that, and you said people laugh at what they don't understand. So I lived with, you know, this shame that, like, oh my God, am I like useless? Am I someone that can't make friends, that can't date? And, you know, like, it was very tough, you know, like I lived with hiding that I had autism for almost 14 years because of what I went through in high school, what I went through in like sometimes sleepaway camp. Like if I heard the word like autism, I get very like scared. And it wasn't until I've been in therapy since my mother passed to understand like, no, it's not a bad thing. It's a gift you have. You just have to find the right people that embrace you for it.
Exactly. Look, it took a long time. We spent a lot of time on education, on sensitization. I think we're past that point. Now, obviously, we're at a point where we need to find, like I say, alignment. We need to take action, but that action has to be aligned. So.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think you're doing an amazing thing. And that's why when you came up with that bill, I said, I have to do something. And then when I met Pierre in 2024, when he announced Neil Oberman, I said, I can't miss that opportunity. Now, I look terrible in the photo because I had just recovered from a tonsil virus. So I'm just wearing like these like shirts, and I was wearing glasses, like blue screen glasses. Because like at the time, people were like, oh, we like you in the glasses. And when I met Pierre, it was like, wow. And the interaction I had with him, he took 20 minutes to talk to me. He asked, when I told him about my mom and my late father, he said, your parents are the definition of real Canadian success. And he said, like, he goes, and he said, like, you're the people we need in the conservative movement.
There's no doubt Pierre Poilievre is fighting for people like you. Pierre Poilievre is fighting for ordinary Canadians. That's what he's all about. That's what inspires Pierre Poilievre. It's what inspires the Conservative Party. It's what inspires, inspires me as well. And stories like yourself are the most inspiring, Drew, because forget about not being capable, you're more than capable. You're a gem in our community, in our society. And we need to, like I said, hone that skill of yours, make it reach its true potential. And of course, the key, and I love the fact that you're engaged and involved in helping others as well, because you don't forget along the way the most important element, which is reach back, reach on your side, and pull people with you. And that's what building, like I said, a strong society is all about.
And that's what Brian Mulroney did. Look what he did in 1984.
He did. The great leaders always do that. They do big things, and they do courageous things. And Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulroney both taught me something very valuable about public policy. You don't always have to take the side of what seems to be popular at any given moment. You got to do what's right, even when it's unpopular at the beginning of the process, and I use free trade as an example. I remember Mr. Mulroney's defense of apartheid as an example. Mr. Harper taking on the challenge of balancing the budget back in the middle of at the tail end of a terrible recession in 2009, 2010, 2011. But again, leaders do the difficult things. True leaders do the difficult things. And those in public office and public office holders that are what I call consensus politicians, those that run at the front of a protest line or at the front of nice polling numbers on an issue, they don't last very long.
The real work is done behind the scenes. It's not done on X, it's not done on Instagram. You can post, but it's really about, as I said, to quote Goldie, politics happens behind the scenes, and that's when you see the decisions happen.
It happens on the front of the scenes as well
that
sometimes.
Too.
I mean, these are discussions we're having that basically elicit interest on the part of people. And that's really the biggest challenge, Drew, I see as somebody now in the Senate for 17 years. I've been involved in politics for 40. I am encouraged by the fact that young people, like yourself and others, are starting to engage in politics more than ever before. I think there was a lull over the last 20 years. And now all of a sudden, obviously, with the challenges of cost of living, the job market's becoming tougher and tougher, Canada is facing existential threats from all corners of the world, including our friend and ally to the south, who is threatening us with tariffs. Here in our own neighborhoods, in our own streets, the common sense reality of a country that was based on values and principles is starting to be challenged in our own streets when we get certain elements that have come to our country that are saying despicable things about faith groups, communities. So we need to rise to face those challenges with some resolve over the next few years.
Very true, and that takes me to my next topic. Obviously, you've been one of the very few that's been very vocal about the IRGC. Now, for those who know, obviously the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Council, they are from the occupied Islamic Republic of Iran, because Iran before 1979 was the gem of the Middle East. It's where my late father was from. He was born in Mahmoudiya, Tehran in 1955. He came to Canada in 65, and obviously, you know, he didn't really want to talk about Iran because of what happened after 79, so it was like pulling teeth from him. It's like trying to get me to acknowledge I had autism back in the day. But before he passed away, he started to have peace with himself and said, you're going to meet my family and you are going to learn a bit of Farsi and maybe Aramaic, because he was what's called Assyrian Iranian, so one of the oldest Christians. But you know, Iran is it's a problem, you know, especially with how they operate, and the IRGC was named a terrorist group. Why hasn't the Liberal government done anything in action? They put it in words, but it's just words. Why aren't we seeing the action we desire?
Look, there is no doubt the Conservative Party has been consistent in dealing with the IRGC. We've been calling for years for the IRGC to be recognized as a terrorist group. It was unfortunate that Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals dragged their feet on that issue for a decade. Finally, with like 5 minutes to midnight on the eve of an election call, they finally listed them as a terrorist organization after many, many years. But so far, it has shown that it's just been posturing and navel-gazing because it hasn't followed up with action. If you look at organizations like Samadoun, for example, right? They're still active and operating in our country, and they've been listed like a terrorist organization. IRGC, after they were listed as a terrorist organization, we had umpteen numbers of articles by the Canadian media of sympathizers, friends and family of the IRGC doing business and living right here in Montreal and Toronto, which is an insult to all Canadians of Persian descent, Iranian descent, who fled that once great country and great people to come here and seek refuge and peace because of the terrorism and totalitarianism back in Iran. So why has it taken so long? I don't know. Why does the Liberal Party continuously hesitate and drag its feet on combating the IRGC right here on Canadian soil, combating Samadoun, combating anti-Semitic organizations that are operating right here in Canada, clearly with the consent of nefarious forces from around the world like Hezbollah and Hamas and other elements? I don't know. The only thing I think I can come up with and surmise is that the Liberal Party loves playing diaspora politics. They love dividing communities, Muslim against Jews, Sikhs against Hindus, Armenian Christians against Azerbaijani, Azeris. It seems to be a pastime for the Liberal Party in playing diaspora politics and exasperating these divisions in our community, which is sad because I'm a son of immigrant parents. They came here in the 1950s. In the country I grew up in, we were always diverse. We always had people from various parts of the world that at times got intertwined and entangled in geopolitical conflicts around the world. I'm of Greek origin. So once upon a time, Turkey invaded northern Cyprus. There was a massive conflict. The two countries went to war back, you know, in terms of Turkey and Greece. But I grew up in a place called Park Extension. There were many Canadians of Greek origin, many Canadians of Turkish origin. We weren't fighting each other in the streets. We weren't calling death to each other. There were some hard political divisions in terms of the geopolitical conflicts in the Balkans at the time, but never in the worst of times, in those years growing up, did I ever see the nonsense I've been seeing in our streets today, where you have people calling death to Jews, Canadians just because of their faith. It's unacceptable. It's unheard of. We have laws in the criminal code that are being ignored by politicians who are weak-kneed and have no spine. And why are they ignoring him, Drew? They're ignoring him because they don't want to upset a particular demographic or another in terms of vote getting. And it's sick. It makes me sick to my stomach.
That's funny you mentioned that, because one of my friends, Lexi, she wanted me to ask you that because you quoted about Melanie Joly saying, have you seen the demographics? Right. And you were disgusted by that. So is that something that we're seeing actually in real time with some of these?
We are, and like I said, it's something I've never seen before. Canadian foreign policy was always value-based, was always principle-based. My support of Israel it's not a religious issue. I'm a proud Christian, and one has nothing to do with the other. It's a geopolitical decision on my part to support a friend and ally, someone who has same common values in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only place that respects basic human rights and principles that we hold dear. So it's not a question of choosing an Islamist state over a Jewish state. It's a question of choosing a state that believes in the values we have, an ally in democracy and freedom, versus an organization like Hamas, for example, that is a terrorist organization that has entangled religious extremism and Islamism into a geopolitical conflict. That's the reality. So unfortunately, the Liberal Party, in my view, continues to play this diaspora politics. They're able to count how many certain number of voters versus other voters, and they side with those that they don't take their decision based on common values or principles or historic alliances or economic benefits. It's always one of short-term, how many voters can I have? So when a Minister of Foreign Affairs tries to justify a foreign affairs position of Canada on the basis that she has X demographic or another in her riding, it's for me, it's a complete rotting of our democratic system. It really is.
That's very well put. And, obviously when it comes to Iran, you have Goldi Gamari, who's like a former MP in the PCs. Now she's fighting for freeing Iran. Have you heard of what's called the Massa Advocacy Group or Army? Because they're in the U.S., they're trying to get senators and congressmen and women to educate on Iran, why that regime has to go, and the occupying mullahs, and also bring in repatriate the former Shah's son. And yes, I'm a monarchist. I support the Shah's son. So that's why I wanted to say to the Massa Advocacy Group and Army that Goldie and I are doing what we can up north. And this is why we have this man here. So I wanted to ask if you've heard of that group.
I have, and to be honest, Drew, I don't take one side or another. I take the side of the Persian people. Canadian Persians who are here, they've got their freedom because they're Canadians, they got their passports. I have such admiration for all of those advocating for freedom back home because they're not just basking in their freedom and their liberties here in Canada and their privilege, they're still looking back home saying, freedom and democracy is good for me, but I want it for my cousins and brothers and sisters back in Iran. I think Iran should have a free election. I think they should have a democratic government. It is a wonderful country, rich cultural history, and if anybody can recognize the cultural history of Persia and Iran is someone of Greek origin, and I think they deserve their freedom just as much as we have ours. And I believe that the number one element that distinguishes what makes Canada the best country in the world, what makes Western democracies the best countries in the world, is our freedom, is our democracy, is the ability to live free, to be entrepreneurial, to benefit from free enterprise, to benefit by the rule of law, to also benefit from the principle of human rights, which allows us to build great societies. So I will support any organization, any movement that believes in that. And when you have entities right now, some evil entities around the world, some of them pretending to be democracies, but when they're not, like Mr. Putin in Russia, the communist regime in Beijing, the dictatorship, the Islamic dictatorship in Iran, President Erdogan in Turkey, all these elements that are dictators, extremists, whose main principle is to eradicate freedom and democracy, freedom of speech, freedom to be able to converse on issues, even if we agree or disagree. There's nothing greater than that.
That's very true. That's very true, and I appreciate you fighting for that. And that's why you're the voice for human rights and freedom of speech and whatnot, because freedom is not free. And it's, as former President Reagan said, it's always one generation away from going extinct.
And look, there are millions of people through the history of time that have fought for their freedom, and they've died for it. But unfortunately, we're living in an era today, especially in the Western world, where we forgot those who perished before us in World War I, World War II, in places like Korea, and other wars around the world. And right now, there's people fighting in Ukraine for their freedom against the tyrant. We see in the beautiful country of Taiwan, where they're being threatened by communist totalitarian Beijing. And it doesn't end there. It is the biggest challenge around the world right now. We see what's going on in Israel, an independent, free, democratic country being challenged by a terrorist organization, and a terrorist organization which is using a group of people, i.e. the Palestinians in Gaza, as a shield, weaponizing the Palestinians, basically to make it look like Israel somehow is carrying out crimes against humanity, when the true criminals against humanity is the Hamas movement that is using the Palestinian people as shields, and women and children in Gaza. That is the reality. Instead of providing food to the people of Gaza, they're providing resources to build tunnels and bombs and makeshift bomb centers in order to attack the state of Israel, the only Jewish state in the Middle East. And yet you have media entities, certain left-wing organizations in the Western democratic world that think this is, the fault of Israel somehow. We forget that what happened on October 7th. We forget that the instigator of this war, the cause of this war, started from a terrorist organization called Hamas, an extremist organization who basically doesn't believe in a two-state solution, for example, right? They believe in the destruction of Israel. That's what this war is all about. The only one Jewish state on this earth.
Mm-hmm. Very true. What were your thoughts on Operation Rising Lion? What were your thoughts on that?
Look, it's amazing what the state of Israel was able to do, right? And what they've able to achieve, which again goes to show when human resolve is there and you believe in something and you dedicate yourself to it, you can do amazing things and great things, right?
Very true. Very true and amazing. We really appreciate your voice on this. A lot of Iranians are going to really appreciate you now. So your follower count might jump up by the thousands thanks to this.
Well, my Persian friends all across this country are very grateful for the position I've taken for years. The position, of course, that is shared by the Conservative Party, by Pierre Poilievre, and it's a long-standing position that goes back to Stephen Harper and all our party leaders. We will stay steadfast with the Persian Iranian community right across the country. They're great people. They're great Canadians. They contribute vastly to our society. And again, I take my hat off to them because they're activists. They still stand up and they're fighting for their cousins. They haven't forgotten. And it's important. I mean, I think it's important that we're Canadian first. Doesn't matter where we come from. But it's also important anywhere in the world where freedom is attacked, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, we need to be there. We need to be that beacon of hope for people.
Very true, Senator. And then take it into freedom of speech and and just freedom in general. You've been, rightfully so, the biggest critic of liberal online censorship. And this is a big thing for me. Bill C-11, Bill C-18, and the most controversial, Bill C-63. Yeah. So C-11 is a way to bring in to see Canadian content, so to say. C-18 was the one that really angered me because it's like, why? Because I'm thinking, why can't I see news on Meta or Facebook? Like, it's up to Canadians to decide what they discern as bad news, fake news, whatever the term is. And then C-63, which is the worst, it's like I'm thinking, are we living in Minority Report? Like, what if I send a message to my friend and it's deemed as politically incorrect? Well, we got to come put you under house arrest now because, you said a tweet, but it's like, it's a private message I had. It doesn't mean, that's what I'm really worried about. So what led you to look at these bills and say, Senator, this has to change right now or scrap it?
Look, any time, as good an intention as it might sound, when a politician in the government decides to monitor and determine what is acceptable and not acceptable vis-a-vis media, social media, take a step back. Be skeptical. This is how dictatorships around the world operate. First, they say we're doing it in order to make sure society's protected from misinformation. We're doing it to make sure there's not terrible content out there that goes against the values and principles of our nation, our people. But who determines that? Who is the decider of what's acceptable to post online and read online and so on and so forth? right? Who's this bureaucrat that sits in Ottawa, or a committee of bureaucrats that will determine what is balanced, what is fair? And also we live in a world, of course, where that camera over there has become a very powerful tool. It has allowed us, Drew and Leo, to be able to sit here and put content out right across not only Canada, and by the way, it's Canadian content. He's 100% Canadian, I'm 100% Canadian. This is 100% Canadian content. So no one can accuse this of being foreign content. And thanks to the advent of social media, Canadians more than ever not only have an opportunity to express themselves freely, to enhance the discourse of our political debate on policy and what have you, but we're also able to disseminate this around the world like never before. So why I take true offense to all these bills you mentioned, and they're ultimately offensive, let the Canadian public determine what is legit and what is not legit. The Canadian marketplace will determine what content is good and what content is bad. Furthermore, C11 was nothing more than an attempt to support traditional broadcasters in this country. We've been doing it now for decades. Doesn't matter if it's Bell Media, Rogers, Quebecor, of course, Radio Canada, CBC. These are all organizations that benefit from government regulations, create monopolies to the benefit of certain shareholders, to the benefit of certain entities, and they also fundamentally decide who the winners and losers are in terms of Canadian culture and Canadian content. The truth of the matter is Canadian content, both in streaming, making movies, has never been at a higher level than it is today, right? We have never had as much dominance on the global scene in terms of Canadian musicians, artists. Our footprint, our digital footprint around the world is growing in leaps and bounds, and we're punching way above our weight. The only people that don't like, of course, what's going on right now is the fact that all these giant traditional broadcasters I just talked about are facing competition. So when Senator Housakos and Drew sit here and we have an interview, it is a platform that attracts people. And you keep doing this show and you keep garnering attention, you're going to be attracting thousands and thousands of people. You talked about earlier about Northern Perspective, which I did an interview. They've been at it, Tanya and Ryan, they've been at it on that show to give them a little shout out for a number of years. And they've built an amazing following, right? And you're just at it now for a little while. And I'm sure once people see the charm, the intellect, and all the quality, after me anyways, quality guests you'll have on your show, you'll be attracting a lot of people as well. So look, my view is government has to get out of all business. The business of government is to take care of certain social community issues that the private sector can't manage. You need to build a general alignment in terms of vision of the country, and particularly like Canada, our federation, the federal government's role is to align on healthcare, on education, on taxation, on security, national defense, make sure there's safety in our streets, and creating the preconditions, economic preconditions to create wealth, period. After that, let the Canadian public determine what they want to watch, how they want to live, what they want to say. Freedom of speech is not negotiable in a democracy. The only place, of course, I as a conservative draw the line, as long as there's no hate in that speech. And that's probably the only exception I make. And again, it's not incumbent on me to determine what hate speech is. It's incumbent on me to help contribute laws to define what that is. But then it's up to our judicial system, our security forces, to make sure that in a tempered, legitimate way, that hate speech in this country is curtailed without touching freedom of speech. That's, of course, the challenge that democracies face.
Very interesting. And obviously, as I said, you just nailed it right there, especially C63, because the biggest concern that we have, that some of like the conservatives I speak to, such as like my friend Michael and James, we're really concerned that they're going to bring back a zombified version of it when the House sits again. And then that's when they're going to, it's their last grasp to really say we're in control.
Well, Drew, I mean, I would be remiss if I don't bring up in this interview the fact that you see that in the current negotiations and renegotiations of the North American Free Trade Deal with Canada and the United States, President Trump has made it clear to Canada that the digital sales tax on digital platforms is a non-starter. And the Liberal Party on C11, they fought tooth and nail for it. They were tearing their shirts in indignation. They made it clear it was a hill they want to die on, and they already caved on that. Which, by the way, we Conservatives warned them. You cannot put into place measures when you penalize streamers and large, digital platforms by taxing them, not creating an unfair marketplace in order to support the traditional broadcasters, that you're not going to get pushback from the Americans. That came back from the White House in this course of negotiations. And I think it was just one of many stupid things the Liberal government did. They've walked it back. I suspect they will continue to keep a lid on it, but we're going to make sure, because like I said, our freedom, our democracy, our free enterprise markets, they cannot function unless people have unfettered freedom. You can't create partial freedom.
It has to be total freedom.
Total freedom, and when it comes to expression, freedom of religion, freedom of association, they're at the cornerstone of what we're all about.
That's amazing. Senator, I really want to thank you for coming on. There's so much more to ask, but it's like, look, guys, we finally did it, and it's the first of many more. Hopefully, this is a real fighter, as I've seen. I endorse Senator Leo Housakos. For those in the special needs community, you have a fighter. You have someone that will fight with Bill S-203 to make sure special needs Canadians get the benefits they need to be contributing members to society. To those, as you said, and what we spoke about too, he will fight for human rights. He will fight to make sure you have the freedom, especially with online censorship. Senator Leo, where can people connect with you if they want to?
Listen, reach out to leo.housakos at sen.parle.gc.ca. I try to get back to all my emails, all the queries I get from citizens and constituents. Come visit me in Ottawa, send me an email. I look forward to representing you, working with you. And I just want to say, Drew, thank you for having me on your show. You're my inspiration. Keep up your amazing work. We need more people like you in this country, and only then we'll be able to build even a greater Canada. So
thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
It means the most to me. Guys, make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe button if you like the Drew Experience. We're growing. We're back. I have a bigger fight and purpose to unite Conservatives, fight for a free Iran, and obviously represent special needs Canadians. So make sure to subscribe. Follow the Senator Leo. He's not just a mentor. He's a friend. Drew Experience out.